could have happened in the meantime.
It's possible. Yeah. I mean,
Because I had it so that I was always logged in. I just had to hit the icon
okay.
and it would pop up.
Yep, that's what I do. Because
Yeah, because I
going through, yeah, I think, oh, I'll remember that password. No, I don't.
don't even remember where I wrote it down.
It's me either.
Jeremy, can you hear us?
I can hear all about Al's mail app. Yeah, I'm all good.
Yeah, sorry, we had issues logging in.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I can hear you. You can hear me?
We
You
can.
can, yep.
And
Great.
we can see you.
Yeah, you look even
Great.
better.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, sorry for the delay. It is now 6:40 and we are now live.
Okay, we are recording. We're going to call the meeting to order for October 23rd, 2024, Mendon Board of Health. We'll do a roll call.
John Pickner here.
Joyce Gilmore here.
Colleen Straponi here.
Jack McClellan here.
Alan Greenberg here. And we have the town administrator.
Hi, yeah, Town Administrator Jeremy Stoller joining as well.
Thank you. All right, first thing we'll go to is good and welfare for the public. Is there anyone in the audience or at home that would like to make a statement? See anybody?
We have nobody online with us.
All right.
We'll take it
We'll
first.
move, I see new business is the next item on the agenda, and I see we have none.
No new business?
All right. Old business. Do we want to skip that for now, where that's going to take us a while?
That is why Jeremy's on with us.
That's why Jeremy's on. So then we're going to go right to old business, Board of Health permit fees review.
And just to preface this, I had a conversation with Jeremy earlier today because I knew we'd be talking about this issue. And I've actually had conversations with some other folks and just trying to gather through some research. And in conversing with Jeremy, he was kind enough to offer to come on board tonight because he knew we were going to be talking about it, to kind of add his perspective as a town administrator as to what we were going to discuss. So that's why Jeremy's on.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Jeremy, do you have anything you want to add before I move on?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chairman. So I kind of wanted to contextualize what Board of Health fees mean for the town writ large, and how they're part of our overall revenue structure. So I know there's a proposal from staff from Jack and Colleen on how to a proposed fee structure versus the current fee structure. So I kind of had two comments, one on how I view fee increases writ large, and then more so specifically towards Mendon's budget. So I'll start on the latter, on more specifically towards Mendon's budget. So we're about $19 to $20 million a year in property taxes, about $500,000 a year in state revenue. And then the balance of our budget, $3 to $4 million, is in what we call local receipts. And those local receipts are comprised of all sorts of things, but principally motor vehicle excise tax, over which we have no control. The registry sends out commitments based upon the motor vehicles registered in Mendon, and our assessors and collector's office deals with those. And the other two really large pieces are meals sales tax and cannabis local option sales tax. And those are both percentage-based fees. So as the cost of goods go up, those revenues go up because they're pegged to a percentage. And then we have things like the Board of Health fees, which are nominal dollar values, not percentages. So they comprise a part of our revenue stack that we use to balance our budget every year. And as I've had discussions with Jack and then Tom earlier today, most, if not all, or a majority of these fees have not been touched since the mid 2000s, right? We're talking 2008, 2010, something like that. So Tom and I did a quick little calculation, and the buying power of $100 in 2008 now requires $146. So if we had kind of kept fees flat from 2008 to 2024, that $100 has, is now only worth 2/3 of the purchasing power that it was worth when the fee was originally set. So the discussion that we had earlier was about how kind of fees are directly tied to the services that they then provide, and the town is not interested in trying to make fees 100% cover the cost of the time going out and doing an inspection and all of that. But the kind of marginal nature and the individual nature of Board of Health activities necessitates the origination of these fees. But also, these fees are now part of our general operating structure. So they fund the general fund, writ large. So all of these monies kind of go together, get washed around, and then fund the general fund. So without getting too kind of in the weeds on how we do stuff, my general approach to fees is that we don't really want to see fees go stagnant for a decade plus and then get doubled. That is difficult to plan for, both on our end and on our fee payer end, the businesses and residents. So my general approach is to take a measured, small increase every year, 2-3 years. So the $100 fee becomes a $105 fee and then a $115 fee, rather than waiting a decade and a half and it going from $100 to $200. So I'm kind of uninterested from the town's perspective in making up for the lack of increases between 2008 and now. And I'm more thinking between now and 2040. I don't want to be looking back at 2040 and say we have 2008 fees. I want to say, as the cost of business in fuel, transportation, labor, goods, services, everything else, rent, property taxes, everything else goes up incrementally each year. I would like the town's fees to kind of mirror that cadence that business owners can plan for, or at least, not if they can't plan for, they can at least expect. So it would be my guidance to the board to say, you should look at your fees in context of what the broader regional community is doing, of course, but also be sensitive to the local business community and say, let's have regular but small increases and not wholesale increases, in irregular intervals. But I also wanted to iterate how important the Board of Health fees, the select board fees, the ambulance fees, all the fees that the town charges, they're all part of this very delicate balance of balancing revenues to expenditures each year. So I'd love to take any questions the board has and drill down as deep as anyone would like to on that. I tried to keep it a little bit high level, but any further discussion I'd be happy to entertain, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they want to add before I comment?
No, I agree with everything that Jeremy said. I mean, it is a process, and it's all, it's all in the same pot, and that's what on the recap sheet you take into consideration the state aid that's received, the local receipts that come in, and you add in all those factors, and that's what actually makes up the tax levy. So without fees, there would be a loss there that would have to be absorbed somewhere along the line, and that would probably be in a tax increase to the taxpayer.
Right.
Not to mention, I also think that as far as commercial businesses go, I mean, I think a fee is a reasonable expectation for any business, and the fee should represent the requirements that, statutory requirements for the board to go out to inspect various and sundry restaurants. Without those fees that we collect, then those statutory inspections would be the burden of the residential taxpayer if we did not have a fee structure in place. That's all I'm saying.
Joyce?
Well, I come from back in the day, and But I feel that it's important to have things go, as you said, incrementally. Now, we didn't do that. Can we catch up by starting now with a substantial increase? Because we didn't do it for how many years would we say?
2008.
15,
2008, 15 years.
roughly.
And so they've been lucky. They've been lucky to not have any increase. But, when you figure it out mathematically, like for the year, it's negligible in my mind now. Let me just say that.
Yeah. So there's both the practical sense on the budget, the practical sense for business owners, and then kind of the optic sense of it. So in order to catch up to 2008, you would need to see a 40% increase this year. And while the gross numbers we're talking about are not large, $100, $200, $300 per year, 40% is a lot in 1 year. So it would be my guidance to the board that perhaps you can lay out publicly to the folks who pay these fees that over the next 3 to 4 years, you can expect some large, maybe 7 to 10% a year over the next 4 years. And then after that, you can expect, things pegged to inflation, sort of, in the 2, 3, 4% range. And I think the Board of Health fees are not how the town of Mendon balances its budget. Like I said, we're a $24 million operation, and $19 million plus of it comes from local property taxes. So this is not how we, make sure we have balance that razor thin line each year. But I think it's important, like I said before, to make sure we're not, if these fees were last raised 16 years ago, that we're not looking 16 years from now and saying, oh man, it's been 32 years since we raised these fees. So catching up with the last 16 years, I don't know if that's the most important thing. I think it would perhaps be equitable to bring fees in line with our regional peers. But I think what's more important is to keep the marginal yearly or bi-yearly increases regular, recurring, and kind of in a planable aspect for the fee payers.
Tom, before I speak?
Well, when Jeremy and I had talked to you earlier, I know from the last meeting, I was kind of looking at it maybe more simplified. Maybe I was simplifying it more than I should have, where I was trying to take the cost from an employee perspective and in looking at trying to get closer to that number, if that was really appropriate to do, given that the thought is that in a budget, the town is factoring in the employee expenses as part of that process, and that theoretically that is factored into the taxes that go out to the businesses and the residents. But Jeremy kind of highlighted, and did Colleen, that with the local receipts, that isn't necessarily always the case. They're not getting every dollar at the tax level. So if there weren't any receipts at all, then people would see an adjustment in their taxes if it was a sufficient enough deficit. And I don't know if in our case, Jeremy, we were talking if these particular fees would have a quote unquote impact, or what kind of an impact it has on the budget overall. But I would agree that there's a need for a fee. But the question is, how are we going to apply desired incremental costs to that fee based on the overall? And I would kind of concur with Jeremy. I think incrementally is the way to go. I think going too much at one time is probably not a good thing to do. I mean, we haven't increased these fees in a lot of years, but I think expense-wise, I think we've been very fortunate, because in the past we had a contractor, and so we were always charging a fee for the most part that covered that invoice, that contractor bill. And we were very fortunate that it wasn't a lot of money for the service, right? So, but you know, things have changed now a little bit and there's a little more expense involved, but so I could see where the fee comes into play, but I would probably not want to go too crazy initially. I like the idea of a plan. So if we're thinking about over the course of 3 or 4 years to do something and communicate that plan out, that's how we want to do it, to try to quote unquote catch up to a reasonable, you know, number.
Mhm.
But I don't think we necessarily have to get to worrying about matching cost
Mhm.
with that fee.
Okay. It's my turn. Jack, have we sent out the renewals?
We have not as of yet.
Okay. They need to go out, right?
They will need to go, yes.
Okay. So I don't know if any of the changes will really take effect this year, because we have to get those applications out. We have to give them time to get them completed. We know in the past, one of the big hangups has been especially on the food side, they get busy with Thanksgiving, they get busy with Christmas, and here it is the end of January, and we haven't got their applications, their complete applications back. So it's become tradition to get them out earlier and earlier so that especially our food establishments can get all their paperwork done before they're
Swamped.
You got it.
Yeah.
All right, and that was, you know, we got some feedback from some of our food establishments as to why they weren't, you know, able to get their paperwork complete. And, you know, we tried to adopt a policy that would accommodate that. So I don't feel as though Jack can hold those renewals any longer. So this is not going to take effect this year. There are some fees that if we were to use our cost analysis, don't need to be changed.
Mhm.
They've been acceptable, they've been in practice, we're more than covering our costs. I don't see at this time any reason to make an adjustment, so there's quite a few of those at the bottom of the list. What I would propose to do is to have something in place that's going to take effect the next calendar year. Give 6 months, 9 months notice to our establishments that the renewal fees have been reevaluated. If they, you know, and this is what the new fees are going to be. So that when the applications go out next October, they know what's happening. And at the same time, based on what, you know, Jeremy's suggestion is, we could even go as far as this is going to be the plan going forward so that they can anticipate not only 6 to 9 months in advance what the next calendar year's fee is going to be, because that's probably going to be the largest incremental fee. But again, I want to keep it reasonable. We're not looking to shock anybody or tell anybody that they're not welcome in Mendon because of our fee structure. But I feel as though we do need to make an effort to catch up within reason to what, and numbers don't lie. So I tend to rely on math to calculate our costs. So that would kind of be my proposal. And that gives us maybe a 3-month period or more, because we have other things that we have to attend to kind of get our plan in effect and to vet it. You know, I mean, there's no reason that Colleen, if she were willing, couldn't talk to some of the restaurant owners, food establishment owners about what we're working on and get their input. We know that if we do a comparison to other towns, there are some towns that we're way behind with their charge. And if we were to use what I'm relying on is a kind of a small cost analysis, you kind of wonder how our costs could be so much less than theirs, or how we could charge so much less than them.
Yeah, I wouldn't automatically assume we're quote unquote behind, because we don't know the particulars of that particular municipality and what their expenses, their structure might be. It might be in line with how their municipality is structured in trying to absorb expense.
So
Hard to say.
I think this is a process that's going to take us a little bit of time. I think there are some, like I said, that are going to be real simple to go through. The only other thing that I'll bring up is, it was a small dollar amount, but I know recently our town's dog licenses went from 10 to 12. That's a 20% increase. Now, that 20% only translates to $2. Which you can't get much for $2, but, you know, obviously they evaluated the situation and made the decision that they had to go up. So if you go by the numbers, that's a 20% increase. And whatever it is, every dog owner is gonna pay it that lives in the town of Mendon that licenses their dog. And because it's $2, they're not even thinking about the fact that it's a 20% increase. I feel in our situation, our restaurant owners and septic haulers and stuff like that would be more sensitive to an increase of 20%. But, you know, somehow we got to get in the practice of doing this. I know in the past, we've talked about it and we've done a comparison to other towns, and that's kind of how we worked with our fees, and probably why the fees were left alone. And as you mentioned, our situation with our health inspector, and we were warned by a previous longtime Board of Health member that great deal wasn't going to last forever.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
Eventually, he was going to age out. So we knew some of our increases were coming. And to Jeremy's point, if we have a plan and we express that plan to our fee payers, they're going to know what to expect. Or when they get their renewal and they see an increase, they go, oh yeah, they told me this is, you know, this is the roadmap for the future.
Advanced communication.
The other thing that, I think that I think of is when I go to a restaurant, the cost is substantially more for the food. I mean, they are charging a really fair amount of money for the food. And I don't know what they're paying their staff any higher or whatever. I don't know that kind of thing, but I'm thinking like this, if you look at the cost of the one that's going up to $200, I think that's like 55 cents a day for the year, or something like that, somewhere along that. And their menu prices are substantially more than that. You know what I'm saying? So,
No,
I mean, they're charging more, and it just seems, I think, rational in my mind that it's not that much more when you consider what it costs, you know, so.
Well, the only thing I would say to that, you kind of touched on this a little bit last meeting, was I don't know that I would want to use the ability for our business to charge based on how we should charge our fees. I kind of believe we should charge our fees based on what the services are costing to provide in a reasonable way, as opposed to looking and saying, oh, that restaurant does really well. They're pulling in a lot of.
But that's true. I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is all expenses are up substantially now. I'm not saying that you know, in the last, what was it, 15 years, did we say?
15 years ago.
Yeah, everything has gone up.
And most specifically, I would say the huge increases, Jeremy, you might have a better take on it financially, have really jumped in the last, say, 4 years. COVID really brought about the pandemic really brought about a change economically. And that's where I think in that short period, we saw a lot of increases on prices
Right.
Yeah,
compared to the
everybody.
years before.
Everybody, unfortunately, and you
Yeah.
hate to keep blaming things on the COVID era, but, you know, definitely everywhere you look, everything that you can think of went up. And the last thing you want to do is kind of join that bandwagon and say that, you know, well, everything's gone up, so we have to go up. That's why I wanted, and Jack was very good, Jack and Colleen, to kind of prepare something that relied on actual numbers.
Yeah, I believe we actually have to have a basis for when we look to implement this plan, what we're basing it on, not just because it looks like the business environment is doing very well on what they're taking in revenue-wise, so let's go with that. I think because we need to potentially answer if these increases go up, why is your fee going up? Can you show me why you need to increase your fee? And we have to have a good solid basis for that.
Well, it
Right.
probably has to do with what you have to pay for the person who does it too. That their pay has those 15 years, did we say 15 or 13 now?
Yeah, 15,
15 somewhere.
Long time.
And all that long time, I mean, everybody's salary has to, you know, that's how it works, you know?
And to an extent, I would say taxes, there is a representation in those taxes that we do pay that factors in these increases to a point, right? So as all these expenses have gone up, whether it be salaries or what have you, like just costs of running the municipality.
Right.
I would say a good percentage of that is reflected in taxes. Am I speaking that accurately, Jeremy?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chairman, so our Proposition 2.5 allows us to increase our property tax levy by 2.5% each year, absent of new growth. So as long as we see, you know, the biggest part of our budget is salaries, so those increase 2+% each year, depending on lots of things. And the real estate taxes are the largest part of our budget. But if we see local receipts and the things that are not pegged as a percentage, like your fees and lots of other fees aren't, if they don't increase at all over a decade plus, we're not keeping pace with those increases. And I will say once we go from like a contractor to an employee relationship on the agent side, we also have healthcare costs, which increase at greater than or insurance costs that increase at a greater clip than regular inflation. But I want to make sure that the board, I know the board understands. I want to make sure that anyone who watches this understands that when we go to a relationship that's more expensive, an employee relationships that's more expensive to the town, we also realize greater utility, and we get a lot kind of more out of that. And Colleen does a great job, and Colleen does a great job, but agnostic to the individual. When we have more hours and more dedicated hours to the town, we get greater utility. So it's more expensive, but it's an investment that we consciously made. But I want to make sure that the board understands that the Board of Health fees are a fixed sliver of our revenues. And then if revenues are expanding, whether they're under Prop 2.5, state aid, or pegged percentage-wise, like meals tax and things like that, and then our expenditures are expanding percentage-wise based upon a whole host of factors. If this piece of our revenue stack stays stagnant, it's paying for less and less proportionately each year of our general fund operating budget. So at the very minimum, I would expect all pieces of our local revenue source to increase at a clip approximating what our general fund base level cost increases are.
It's our goal.
And I would just like to remind the board that with the tobacco permit, we did increase double. It went from 75 to 150.
And how long did we do that?
last year.
Okay. Well, we've got some work to do. And I'm glad that we all seem to have a little more information as to why we charge fees and what the importance of these fees are. And some understanding that we don't necessarily have to match the fee with our cost.
Right.
But whatever we work on over the next couple of months, like I said, we'll give all the users adequate, notification as to what the increase is going to be for the next calendar year. So that would be
July 2025. What the permits will, for the next fiscal year.
well, 2025. We're going with these rates,
Correct.
so it'll
So
actually
new
take effect
application to
2026,
Correct.
and then they'll know what our proposed process is going forward beyond that. That they can expect, incremental increases on an annual basis as, a reflection of what our costs go up.
Let me ask you, from your perspective, where do you think that ratio should be?
Initially,
Cost to fees, say end game. What would you say, in your view?
for my background, we need to recover 100%.
So,
But I'm hearing that in a municipality, that's not always realistic.
well, I don't know about realistic, but I think a portion of this does come through in the taxes that are paid. Maybe not all of it, because there's local receipts that the municipality counts on as well, which fees are part of that. But I would say part of that is already being calculated and being paid by taxpayers. So that's why I was wondering, how close in your mind do you think we need to get ultimately to what we see as total cost versus the actual fee we want to charge?
At this time, I couldn't give you an educated percentage because, again, from my background,
Yeah.
I have to not only recover costs, but I have to make a profit. But
Well,
I'm not a municipality.
So, Mr. Chairman, to add a little color to this. So the fees we charge from a Board of Health perspective are because there is kind of a marginal benefit to individuals in ways that like the general taxpayer doesn't benefit from that. But the general taxpayer does benefit from, safe, healthy, clean restaurants, from uncontaminated groundwater, from local septics. So, and extrapolate that to all types of fees that you charge. So it's kind of not our kind of policy approach, or it has not been my policy approach to say we should recover 100% of the fees recover 100% of the cost through fees, because the general benefit of the services is enjoyed by the taxpayer writ large, but not entirely. So we want to recover part of it because the benefit is largely specific, but it's partially spread across the general tax base. So I don't have a great percentage for you. I don't know if we want to say 75% or 60% or 80% or something like that. I think what's more important is to be a predictable kind of increase, predictable cost for businesses. I think your approach to say we're steady for 2025, here's what you can expect for 2026, and here's our idea for 2027 is more than reasonable. And I know we're talking in percentages here, but if we're talking in gross dollars for business enterprises over the course of a year, to do a $25 increase is large. I imagine, I'm not a business person, but I imagine it's largely negligible on their bottom line. But I just want to be clear that it is not my guidance to the board to say we should recover 100% of the cost, because 100% of the benefit is not enjoyed by the fee payer.
Okay, and you answered my question that you couldn't give us a good percentage at this time. And that's pretty much what I'm telling, what I'm saying, Tom, is I can't give you a good idea because I have to think about this differently than I think every day. I don't, there are things that I don't take into consideration in what I do for a living that I have to take in consideration when I sit in this seat and I think about these numbers. And that's why we have these discussions and we get input so that we can go home and we can think about this. So I think we have some good practices, but we need to implement them in getting this in order and then having a plan to go forward beyond that. Again, in the past, I think we've always kind of compared our fees to what other towns are charging. And sometimes we shook our head at what other towns were charging because on this level, on this upper level, you couldn't make sense of what that number was compared to what we were charging. So it's a process to put this together and get a start. And, Jeremy seems to be in agreement with the amount of notice that everyone's going to get. So if that first jump is a large, obviously a larger jump than what will be predicted down the road, if that's what we agree on, then they have plenty of time to prepare for that. And they have time to come back to us and say, question why we're doing it, and we'll be more than happy to, explain what we're doing. Individually, if people individually have questions. This is nothing that's we're talking about this taking effect on applications that are gonna go out 12 months from now.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think that'll give everybody a chance to think about it, come to us about it, and it would even give us an opportunity to modify our proposal if there was good reason to do so. Because we're not running a restaurant. We're not running a septic truck. So if those fees are, our proposal is to adjust those fees to X, and people come to us with good reasons why we shouldn't do that, we have an opportunity, more than ample time, to look at that particular category again. So we're all on the same page.
Absolutely.
All right. You want to dig into some of these numbers, maybe the ones that we feel, I know some of the ones on the bottom, it didn't look like we really needed to do a whole heck of a lot. If we were going to use our cost analysis.
Would you like Jeremy to stay?
Yeah, I was going to say, do we want to?
Jeremy, it's up to you.
I have a 7:30 for a different organization I'm part of, so I'm gonna hop off in a moment. I just wanted to say thank you for having me join tonight, kind of on short notice after my meetings with Tom and Jack. I think the board's in a great spot. I appreciate the spirited discussion tonight, and I thank you for your service to the town of Mendon. And anything I can be of any resource I can be going forward, don't hesitate to reach out.
Jeremy, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeremy.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, good night.
Good night.
All right. At this time, I would propose maybe starting at the bottom of the list. Those seem to be the ones that might be easier. If someone else has another direction they want to go in, I don't have any issues with that.
That's fine with me.
All right.
Start at the bottom.
All right. So why don't we go to the very bottom? We'll go to a tanning establishment. Currently, we're at 100, and it looks as though our costs are well below that. I'm all the way at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that is only because I didn't include Colleen's time, because we didn't have inspections, so I forgot to include her on that one. But Colleen and me, that would raise it to 102.90. How many inspections did you do on the tanning salon? One or two?
It would be an annual.
One annual? So that would be 102.93.
102.93. Okay. Just, I'm gonna look because Jack was nice enough to give us some other information here. I wanted to see if any other towns have a
No,
tanning
just
salon.
That's all.
I don't see it in this sheet.
Where's the tanning,
I don't think there is one.
anymore? No.
But you should have a fee structure in case.
Right,
just-
right, yeah.
Right.
But I'm wondering, has it not gone out of,
Okay.
Mostly they're.
well, because of the skin cancer thing?
Yeah,
So
Sorry.
that's okay. Because I can't think of one that we have, but obviously you need to be prepared.
Right.
I know that at one point, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I remember we either had one or there was a proposal to put one in maybe at Hood Plaza.
Yeah,
So we obviously have to have it in place. We're at 100, we're pretty close to covering our costs. I don't see any reason to adjust it at this time.
Oh, no.
However, going forward, when we come up with a plan for an incremental annual increase,
Mhm.
which we'll try to come up at this time, I'll say maybe with a percentage.
Could you also argue that that scale goes the other way?
Maybe.
to
So-
reduce the fee,
Was that?
to reduce the fee?
I mean, the problem you run into, Tom, is we already try to give, I don't want to say freebies out, but we try to give people zero fee opportunities. Clubs, nonprofits.
Oh, yeah, there's some groups that we.
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
there are expenses incurred there.
Yeah.
That we're not charging for.
Yeah.
Trying to be helpful to both the organization that is going to operate at zero fee.
Yeah.
And protect the public at the same time.
But what I wouldn't want to do is see us, in knowing that, try to capture those costs somewhere else. If anything, I would say maybe we go back to a fee if we think that it's too much.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? As opposed to say, well, we're giving this block no fee, so we need to recoup that somewhere else. I don't know that that's fair to that other category, that's all.
Well, and remember now, this number at the end doesn't capture all the expenses. We just took the two biggest ones.
Well, the belief is that this last column does capture the expense. That's the impression I'm under. Is that not right, Jack?
For the first one, the last one, tanning establishment, that does only include me, but I just added in Colleen if we do get one. So that's gonna be the raise to the 102.93. But me and BOH, tobacco permit, that's right. Yeah, so the only one that's really wrong is the tanning establishment.
But basically that last column, that was the whole idea of the exercise, was to show us what the cost was based on the service.
The two biggest costs.
Service provided.
Right.
The
town is picking up all the overheads.
Well, yeah, but, you know, looking at this from the service perspective, what Jack does, what Colleen does,
Mhm.
based on their TCP.
Right,
And
and
what the
as we
actual-
talked, as we spoke at the last meeting, that's when everything goes according to plan and we don't have to do additional inspections. Because there are some situations that we don't necessarily charge a fee for a second inspection.
Mhm.
And we're in the category where another inspection or another look wouldn't incur another fee.
And well, I guess that could always be a variable on a lot of this. So if everything goes right, this is what this last
Right,
column
correct.
represents, right? But then you could factor that variable in somewhat if you wanted to then increase a fee, knowing that there's an element there.
It's a rarity. that there is not a reason to go back. It's an absolute rarity. There is no establishment that I know of that I've ever inspected that I have not had to go back. for
Didn't
reasons.
require a
There
second,
you
yeah,
go.
Okay.
yeah.
Well, and we know that Jack's had to go back just to get complete applications.
Mhm. So if that's, if what you're saying is actually the norm,
That is the norm.
so is this actually not accurate?
It's probably as accurate as can be.
Well, we have.
It's like you
elect-
said, we're not trying to recover all the costs.
No, but we should know. I'm under the belief that this is the known element, that this is what it was. But
Okay.
I know Colleen wasn't here for the last meeting, so she's given us some extra data here. That if in reality, we have a situation where it's more the norm than an exception, have we undercalculated that column?
Into what reference are we talking about? Her going out to do an additional inspection?
Well, so yeah, what you've said, like how you've calculated a number of inspections and so forth.
We do have additional inspection fees on our fee schedule.
So we have that factored in somewhere.
Yes, if she has to go back out, we charge an additional.
Oh,
Not for the, but for the first one, no, right?
For the first one, no.
Right, so that should be taken into consideration in the fee, but then after that, if we have to go back a second or a third time, they're paying for it.
oh, okay, so you do have something in place that recoups that.
For the second or the third time, yeah.
Okay.
Instead of individualizing, going down this by column and thinking about, should we raise the tanning by this amount of money? Why not take Jeremy's suggestion? He said a percentage increase, because you have 16 years. And think about doing it that way, for this first year, start with, he had suggested between 5 and 7%. You don't have to do that, you could do 5%. Just like you used the example of the dog licenses when there was a 2%,
20.
just a 20%, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Just go down the line, all of them, hit them all for that increment, the same level playing field. Instead of going down and trying to, justify, or does this meet the cost actually, is it reflected in the permit fee? Just take a percentage. Choose to get us caught up, because the fees are part of, it's like a cake. I look at it as a cake, and you have, Jeremy explained, the various and sundry revenue sources. Local receipts is part of that cake.
Yeah.
So that growth should be the same as any other receipt that's factored into making the cake. So we haven't done that, to Jeremy's point, in 16 years. So we have a little bit of catching up to do. In the letter that you suggested that we send out, I say we send out one letter next year saying we've come to, realize that our fees need to be elevated by 20% in 2026. 5%, whatever the number is, in 2027. So that we get ourselves caught up. So then our next fee structure, now our growth is on the same plane as any other receipt that's captured locally.
So
So where do
with
we
that
start?
plan, that kind of goes to my question in trying to get your viewpoint. What's your end game? But you would mention that you kind of need to kind of digest a little bit more.
Well, I'd have to, again, I think in the head of a small business person who's trying to make a profit. So I have to think of this, I don't know how everybody else evaluates things. I have to think about this slightly different, because we're not trying to recover all our costs. We're not trying to make a profit. We're not trying to have a return on investment for a piece of equipment that we bought. That's how I have to think on a daily basis. So I like to recover all my costs, but these costs are gonna go up every year.
They
We'll
will.
be chasing this,
As Jeremy alluded
Right,
to,
we-
there's always going to be an incremental.
we would be chasing that for a long time.
Right, so
Or
I think
we'd
the
have to
goal is,
overburden the fee payers.
right, so I think the goal here is to do a little catch up. But as Jeremy pointed out, not necessarily become equal with that,
Mhm.
but so the question becomes, what would our graph look like? What would our scale look like? What would our formula look like for getting to where we want to get to with this plan that Jeremy referenced? And to your point, starting out somewhere and then figuring out what do we want to do the next 3 to 5 years so that we have a moving scale, right? To come closer to that.
Well, we did 5% increase on the $100 first one. It'd jump up to $105 next year. We did 5% every single year. Next 5% would be $110.25. Next 5% would be $115.50. And the fourth 5% would be $120.75.
Yeah, so we wouldn't get anywhere quick. I'm thinking off the top of my head,
Get a good chunk up front.
yeah, I'm thinking like a 25% increase year
And
one.
then smaller.
And then maybe if we went from a 25% increase, if we could, and again, we may have to see it in a graph, like you mentioned, if we went from 25 the following year, maybe 15%. The next year, maybe 10%. As we catch up, that smaller percentage will have a little more oomph to it because it's on a bigger base. So, I mean, maybe we would have to map that out and see what that looked like, what a 25% increase in year one looked like. And then go from a 25 to a 15.
And you know,
And
along
down 5% every year till we got somewhere between, I think Jeremy's 5 and 7%, I
Right.
think is what I heard. So if we start at 25, I mean, this first one, that's only gonna bring it to 125.
Correct.
You know, so if we went like 25, 15, 10, and then maybe 7.5.
So what you have to do though is we would need to know, you know, in addition to knowing the formula as we go, we're going to need to know what our end game is, right? So I think from what I gather from Jeremy is trying to equal that is not a reasonable thing to do.
Well, not only is it probably not reasonable, as you mentioned and Jeremy mentioned, the taxpayers do derive some benefit.
Sure. Oh, yeah, the
So it's
services
not, all the benefit is not to the restaurant owners or
That's
the
correct.
trash haulers, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay, so to get in this world, in the municipal world, to get to 100% would be overbearing on the permit and fee holders.
I think so.
Okay,
Right.
and we've sort of talked about that when we talk about our subscriber trash,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Whose shoulders is supporting the bill? So, like I said, if it was sort of graphed out, I'm thinking just first round, 25, 15, 10, maybe 7.5.
So
If I may.
Yes,
All right, so going on $100 again,
yep,
25% increase brings it to 125. Next 15% increase will bring it up to 143. Next increase of 10%, 157, and I did 5% for the fourth year, would be 165.
okay. I would be okay with that. But I want to stop at the 10 and reevaluate. Because if what we're being told today holds true 3-4 years down the road, that 5 to 7 range, I'm thinking we might go to 7.5 before we would go to 5. But it may be too far out to make that decision today, because we don't know, we don't know for sure where things are gonna go.
Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that this is only going to go up every year.
Right.
I think that's a given, right? That's.
Yeah. Along with everything else that the town does to run.
Well, just have, understanding, there's just going to be cost increases that are just going to automatically come into play.
Right, and as Jeremy mentioned, one of the biggest ones is the benefit package. That the health insurance component
Oh, yeah.
is very hard
Right.
to predict
Right.
and very hard to pay for.
So I guess as part of that scale, would we have an end game thought as to how close you'd want to get to what we see as the actual cost? Like 60% of that, 65% of that, what would be a reasonable target to try to make up? Because I think we already, well, at least I believe we should not be going to 100%. So we should never see a fee of $200 and something because the cost is right now, 260 something, right? So I never want to have a fee of 260 something for the fee.
Well, we don't know, because do the future value of $263 today, do the future value of what that money buys 4 or 5 years from now.
Well,
That
so
263 is not gonna buy anywhere near, right? If you do the future value,
yeah, that the CPI number,
okay?
I mean,
So we have to start somewhere, moving in the right direction, being as fair and equitable that everybody that's paying the bill.
right. So I think we have to have a basis for that, so that we all are on the same page as to how that increase came about and why the increase came about.
Yeah,
Well,
that's great. Go ahead.
one of the things that, just for instance, I'm going to talk about the septic hauler, okay? So his cost is $100. Is that what I see? Septic hauler, where am I? Okay, up here. He's paying $100. Now, I know back in the day, when I had to have my septic system pumped, which I'm very diligent about because I want it good, that was, $100. Well, now it's $350 to have it done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's charging incrementally for his services.
Mhm.
And you would say, well, okay, then, that needs to be at least within a reasonable factor of how he's done it. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
Well, I just wouldn't want to use a business's revenue ability as the basis for raising our fees. I'd rather say.
Well, it's what they're charging you. I mean, it's they're charging you that.
That's correct.
Right, and so when you think about it, I mean, so they're getting for every single person, and our increment is just for 1 year. He just has to pay that for 1 year, not, we're not making him do it for every person he hauls from.
But I'd like to think he's structuring his pricing, like Alan, for example, is a business owner.
Right.
You're structuring your pricing based on your expenditures
Correct.
and what you need to make.
Correct. And
profit.
that gentleman or gentlewoman, whatever.
Right.
Where women-owned businesses, they're doing a better job by making sure that they have incremental increases on a regular basis than we've been doing.
Right,
Oh, correct.
that's what I'm saying.
That's,
But the variable here, though, is comparing the private sector to the municipal sector. So Alan, being a private business owner, he can say he's got a desire for 50% profit. So his pricing is going to reflect that.
Right.
However, in a municipality, there should be no such concept, in my view, as profit.
Correct.
Well, we're not talking about profit, we're talking about staying with the expenditures of how things, how the cost is going up all the time.
Right.
The cost of everything is going up for the town.
Well, yes,
Right.
so expenses within the town,
Correct,
but not the expenses or not what a business is generating revenue-wise. It's what our cost in the town is what we should be using as a basis.
right, what I'm saying, it should go up incrementally.
Oh, I
Right,
can see the
I just was
incremental.
using my thing about, paying $100 as a citizen and for a service, and then it's seeing that it's gone up, incrementally, so now it's $350.
Yeah,
I paid $350 to have it, my septic system.
So-
And he hasn't done anything different.
well,
No,
that's
Right.
you're using a business as a reference basis.
Correct.
Instead of the municipality.
Right.
As the cost of the municipality.
And they're two different animals.
Right,
But the municipality's cost is going
Right,
up at the
and
same time.
that's why we're going
I'm
through
saying.
this, that's why we're going through this exercise.
Right.
But we all have to put our municipality hat on
Right,
and think of it as the municipality, not as the homeowner who's buying services or as the small business owner. Because it's a different animal.
right, but what
It's a
I'm
zebra with
saying,
no stripes.
what I'm saying
have
is
to-
that there needs to be a certain incremental
Right, and that seems to be
thing.
the road we're on.
That's my point is that
okay, yeah. Well, I would buy
I'm not
that.
saying that we're, I'm saying that incrementally,
Yeah,
it makes sense because,
Plan. I like the idea of after 3 years, then we stop and reevaluate, because then I think, you're right, you're getting ahead of yourself. Not to mention there may be other considerations that you have to take into consideration when reevaluating the fee structure, and one of them being, we're seeing a steady decline also in state aid. So that deficit has to be made up somewhere. It may be something that we'll have to address, well, we will. And when we have a 3-year plan to incrementally increase the fees, I think 3 years should be the stop point. Reevaluate and then go from there.
Is everyone comfortable with the proposal of
25,
25-year one?
15, year 2, 10, year 3.
And leave it at that.
And then we'll hold at that point.
and evaluate again.
Right, because again, today, someone who does this every day
yeah,
is telling us 5 to 7. So before we commit and try to hit that target, that may be a target that in 3 years is a different range.
Right,
well, we're actually, sounds to me like we're going away from what Jeremy's general view is on 5, we're talking about a huge increase up front. And then
As we have-
tapering versus Jeremy's approach of smaller incremental process.
I don't think we'll ever
catch up.
get there.
Well, so,
And a 25% increase on $100,
yeah,
it's a 25% increase, but it's a small amount of money. Just like I mentioned, dog licenses went from 10 to 12. That's a 20% increase, but it's only $2. So because our fees are so low, okay, as long as we're not gonna blow anybody out of the water, 25% increase isn't a huge amount of money.
well, you talk about that when you use the license as an example, you make it sound like 20% is a huge increase.
Well, it is.
So
If we're
that
talking
means
percentages,
but that means 25% is even a greater increase.
correct. But again, if we look at what that change is,
Yeah.
because the numbers we're talking about are so small, if we were talking about a 25% increase on everyone's property taxes, that would be a huge number.
Sure.
But we're talking about numbers that are so small, until we get to some of the more involved things like $450 for new construction.
But those are set by the engineers. We wouldn't touch those fees.
Okay, so that doesn't even enter into our plan.
Even if you did a 25% increase on this first one on the food service, the current permit fee is $100. 25% increase on that.
Yeah, it's $25.
Doesn't cover the cost, the actual.
Not even close.
Right.
Well, even after the 3 years, even after the 4 years.
But at least
Well,
we're closer
initially,
though, we're not looking to, for the
Yeah.
to cover 100%,
Yeah.
but we're in the ballpark.
Right.
We're not in the ballpark right now.
We're not, and so I think the concept of getting there slowly is a better approach than trying to recoup a lot in a shorter period. It may be a better approach. If you consistently do it every year, I think eventually we probably would get to where our
But
target.
we're behind. We're already behind because we haven't done anything.
No, but to Jeremy's point, we could, I guess if you wanted to use CPI, as Jeremy used as an example, what $100 bought 2008, be $146 today. You could almost slap $46 on all these $100 fees right there and say,
Correct.
the cost of the economy. And you, right?
Right, but
You could consider doing that.
we're trying to be considerate and we're not doing that.
That's exactly right. So that's my point. So we could theoretically use that as a basis for doing that. Well,
We
the economy, we've been way behind and we're gonna hit you with a 50% increase right up.
But we're starting off with a scale that's continually going down.
Right. So I'm just saying, you can go that way to start at the 25 and a little less. Who knows along the way, though, we might have to go back up again.
Well, it's gonna have to be visited.
Yeah,
Like you said,
Annually.
yeah, an
But
annual.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
a 3-year plan is reasonable,
Right.
and I think the increment that the board is proposing, is, more than reasonable.
Yeah.
And it's less than, to your point, the actual CPI increase, and we're taking that into consideration with the businesses, because we're not looking to, punch them in the mouth, you know what I mean, just,
Well, and we're doing this 1 year in advance.
Correct.
So I agree, when you think about it as 25%, that seems like a big increase, percentage-wise. But they have a year to prepare for this,
Oh, no, understood, yeah.
all right? And then they know what our 3-year plan afterwards is. They have time to come to us and ask questions or give us a counter proposal if they have a better idea. But we're never gonna get to that. I don't know if we'd ever get to 60% of that,
Well, and to
because that number's a moving target.
Jeremy's point, we shouldn't be trying to get to that.
Right.
We should never be trying to
Mhm.
equal that. We want to do better, but not trying to equal that.
Right. I think,
That's all.
I think this is a proposal to get us to better.
Yep, start out with a little bit of a,
And I think it's responsible to the taxpayers and it's responsible to the business owners at the same time. We just need to put it in play.
yeah, so the plan would be come up with this new pricing and then put out an informational letter about the new pricing. And kind of try to garner any feedback, pro or con, or no, might not even be any feedback,
probably not.
probably not.
What I would propose,
Because it is really fairly negligible when you think
In
about
the
it.
scheme of things,
Correct.
yeah,
what I would propose is for Jack to move forward with getting 2025 applications out as they stand today.
Okay?
Get those out, give everybody plenty of time to get everything in before December 31st. Give you and Colleen time to chase whatever you need to chase in the meantime, because we always know it requires a little bit. What about February 1st? Sending out what the new proposed fees are for 2026.
yeah,
That's 11 months in advance of when they take effect. That's eight months in advance of when they're actually gonna get the new applications with the new numbers. We go 3 years out with our proposal, so everybody can do the math if they desire to. And then we briefly look at it every year just to see how we're doing, right? Because you can do the same thing you did here in a spreadsheet. You've already got it made up. So we'll know what this number is, even though we're not trying to achieve 100% of it. We'll know what that number went up incrementally. We'll know what the current fees went to currently. And we could even have a column because we know what percentage, we know what they're gonna go to the following year. So instead of this proposed column, you could do the column with what the new fee is gonna be. Present fee, so that would be 2026, and then this one here would be 2020. Yeah,
Yeah, 1,
Yeah,
2,
because-
3.
yeah, because we know what they are based on the percentages that we're setting. So it'll be a brief look, just to kind of evaluate where we're at. And then go into the next year. And I would say, have a serious talk before we get to before that last year is over, right, where we're at 10.
10 would be the third year.
Okay, so when we're at that year where it's 10, we have a talk with finance or the accounting people, Jeremy, whatever, and see if that number that we're hearing today, that 5 to 7, is still a good number. And if it is still a good number, then we evaluate where we go from 10. Today, I'm inclined to say 7.5. Based on 5 to 7. So I'm inclined to say 7.5. I don't know where I'd go from there. I can't say that today. But before we make that next year or two decision, before we publicize where we're going so that our users know where we're going, that's when we have a discussion again and see if that 5 to 7 is still a good number. Because I don't know how 2.5 overrides, which might be in the pipeline, because that adds to the tax base. I don't know if that stuff, I'm not an accounting, professional, how that might affect that 5 to 7. I don't know if it does or it doesn't. But that's my plan. That's what I would propose.
I agree.
I can see doing that.
I think it's a smart plan. I think it's realistic. 3 years is
Right.
more realistic.
Makes
than
sense.
5. And we have a better feel. Now we understand the process. We can utilize the tools in our sheds and come together and reevaluate the next 3 years,
Okay. So do we need to, at this time, make a motion to adjust the fees to that scale, or do you want to put it on paper first?
Well, I would say not take a motion now. I would say we're in agreement for what we're discussing. I think until we actually have it
the
down.
final draft of the letter.
Right, that's when we would want to.
All right, and everybody's good with like a February 1st date. I'm thinking, especially of food establishments, get through the holidays.
Yeah.
So that when
Right.
they get the letter, they can give it their attention. They're not, other than planning for Valentine's Day, they should be, a little smoother.
That's a guy talking about Valentine's Day.
Hey.
I'm wicked impressed.
And then the wording of that letter will be very important as to how.
Well,
I'm thinking- I'm just thinking, we can do a draft, but I think how
Sure.
we present it as a group, that we're factoring in the right phraseology, the basis for the increases.
Right,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
they've been spoiled these last,
I don't know if I want to tell them, I don't want to say.
Yeah, if we're talking about food, we don't want to say spoiled. But no, I think we have plenty of time to go through that a few
Right.
times if necessary. so that
Okay,
we
yeah.
get it right and get it out. And February 1st does not have to be a hard date. Okay, the reason I threw that out again is just to let the majority of our fee payers and our users get through the holidays.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and it's still
But still
more than
leave.
fair, time-wise, enough notice for them to start to digest.
Absolutely. And I think that's key.
More than reasonable.
You know, I think it's key, the communication, early communication.
Yeah,
So that, you know, and it would be a lot easier for Jack, quite frankly, when it comes to the permit processing, because now they've had this time to digest it, ask questions. You know, I think the permit renewal next year will be much smoother.
Well, we've never had a map like this,
no,
okay? The process that we've used in the past to look at we've always looked at what our neighbors are charging. Just like we do, well, what are our neighbors doing for tobacco? What are our neighbors doing for dumpsters?
and that was an element Jeremy referenced as part of the assessment, right?
Mhm.
It is,
The
It is
regionalized
part.
look, right?
absolutely.
So,
And especially within the partnership too.
correct, yeah. I mean, that's a good number of towns, so that gives you a good reflection of I'll say the market,
Yes,
you know, what's going on out there. So we're just going one step further
Mhm,
and fine tuning it
mhm,
so that we have a predetermined path
mhm.
as far as our fee structure goes. We're still using all the things that we've used in the past. We're just going one
and we're keeping
level
ourselves
above.
current. You know, that's the thing, when people will come now after this, you know, we'll be keeping ourselves current. We're aware of it now, the bell's been rung, we'll continue to monitor it.
Okay, so at this point, we're all in agreement with that proposed plan.
Mhm.
So just on, it is 25% for the first year the board agrees,
Mhm.
15% for the second year the board agrees, and 10% for the third year the board agrees.
Mhm.
And is that, we doing this across the board?
Across the board.
Across the board.
All the way to minus the engineering.
Right.
fees.
Right, that's gonna change in reflection to what we're being charged, because as you pointed out, that's a fee that we're actually paying.
Right.
So that's a fee that we really need to recoup 100%.
Which fee is that?
Tom and Steve's.
Oh, there, yeah,
Yes.
there.
Engineering.
Title V
Yeah,
engineering.
this
Right.
stuff.
But that will
right here.
also have to be looked at, should there be any increases on Tom and Steve's end.
So I do ask them before the fiscal year, if there's a reason they raise, so they should let me know beforehand.
So
And-
that'll be a category that we'll look at annually.
Mhm.
Yes,
And to, as Colleen said, with what you do inspection wise, that also might be an element that could affect Steve and or Tom in their services, depending on what it might be, right? They might get into an extra assessment on something.
Mhm.
Well, we've kind of touched on that when we've talked about some of the projects that are in the pipeline,
Right.
and the ones that we perceive are gonna be coming are not typical to the town of Mendon.
Now, didn't we talk about doing some wording adjustment?
yeah, putting it on the permanent application.
Right, so that we phrase it, you know, this may be the base fee, but something like if this is a non-standard,
Right,
Residential,
additional
traditional.
fees may apply type of thing.
right,
So that in itself could cover.
right, and we've talked about that already
Right,
in anticipation, and we've experienced it, so it's really a realization that the projects and the land that's left in town to develop, it doesn't develop easy. The septic systems become more sophisticated, the blasting in some areas becomes larger than what we're accustomed to,
mhm,
even though an engineer would tell us that really isn't a large-scale job. It's larger than what the residents are accustomed to.
right.
So those fees, just like we did in the past for the drive-in, need to be open-ended. Now, that's not to say that if an applicant was looking for a approximate number, we couldn't ask our engineering members to try to give us an idea of what they think is going to be additionally involved. But
Yeah,
it still has to be open-ended.
Well, when you say open-ended, I think there has to be a defined base. And that to cover the extras, I think you do that in the wording.
Right, but that would be our base. But they know that that's not your typical 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath house.
Right.
You know, and we know we're gonna see that because we've seen it, in the past. We saw it at the drive-in, we've seen things at Dunkin' Donuts.
Mhm.
Systems that are newer technologies for large flows in a short period of time, systems that require an operator almost to maintain them and make sure they're working right. So, the bills that we're gonna get for the additional inspections or review of plans is gonna go up. So that's something we already covered.
Well, will this wording be in effect for the new applications this coming year, that the wording changes?
Yes.
It will be, okay.
Yep.
So,
Do we need to put an effective date?
well, do we have a draft yet?
That was okay, no.
So we should probably just validate what the proposal is on the wording changes, so we all see what's being put forth come January 1.
All right, so why don't we put that on the agenda for our next meeting?
That way we can finalize and,
No, we'll put that on the agenda for our next meeting. Get that ironed out. All right, so I take it we can put this topic to rest for a while?
Yep.
Right, until the next meeting when
Well, the next meeting will be regulations.
okay,
yeah,
so.
Get those.
Joyce is prepared.
Yep, I got them too.
Jeez.
What about you, John?
I don't mind.
I don't know
Yeah,
what
so
happened to
it's
that.
in process.
It's in process, yes.
So-
So we'll get the applications out for
Right,
the next year,
right.
same
So
rates.
Yeah, took it.
when you get to it,
Maybe,
and when Tom
maybe
writes
wrote a
it,
note to say, oh, I'm going to
we can
play
put it
golf
back on
right
the
now,
agenda.
see you
Correct.
later.
to touch on it again.
Yep.
And should we let Jeremy know what we decided on at this point, or wait until we get further into it?
Well, I mean, if we have, that's gonna be the plan, we could.
We could show them the draft.
Right.
Just show them the
We'll
draft,
get the draft letter and stuff.
has any
Okay.
additional,
Yeah, no, I don't see any
Thoughts?
reason not to
Comments?
include them.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I want to make
We
sure we
talk to them
cover it.
pretty regularly too.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
No, it was great, and thank you for reaching out to him. I think it was great to invite him. It was something I didn't think about.
well, actually, I wasn't anticipating he'd be able to be part of the meeting. I just wanted to have an additional viewpoint to throw into the discussion. And he was gracious enough to offer, hey, would you like me to attend the meeting? And I said, oh, that'd be awesome. That way, we can all hear from your perspective.
So
Addition-
we're not all blaming you.
Absolutely. In addition, I did also have a conversation with a gentleman at DLS this morning. Probably knows Division of Labor Services. And the other group within the DOR, and correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of has some oversight with regard to, I got that page. So I found that very interesting, the feedback he gave, similar to what, Jeremy was talking about, and how you factor things in, and it's not cookie cutter when it comes to municipality.
Mhm.
There's just a lot of different variables. And one of the points of that, one of the elements that came out of that conversation was overall policy. And Jeremy and I touched on a little bit earlier today, overall policy of the municipality for fees.
Mhm.
A DLS actually, their recommendation actually is that a municipality should have an overall policy when it comes to fee schedules.
Mhm.
So that in general, the structure is everyone's following the same kind of
Path, yeah.
rules, so to speak, right? Sure, there might be little variables within each department, but everyone's kind of approaching it in a consistent mindset, right? And I thought, geez, that's a pretty good point. And I just didn't want us to necessarily, in hearing that, I'm thinking, well, we as a board, I know what we're trying to do within our group. But are we stepping outside of the construct of that thought and maybe this will become an eventuality in the town? Because I know it had been discussed in the past at the select board level in times past. Just hadn't really been, nothing came to fruition yet.
And that happens,
Yeah, I mean, and eventually, who knows, we might see something.
Right.
But in the meantime, we know we need to kind of take a step. And
Because it's all, at the end of the year, each municipality has to file a financial report with the DOI, and it's called a recap sheet. And on that recap sheet are the different layers of the cake. Whether it's the tax levy, it's the state aid, it's the local receipts, and then any other availability of other funds that could be grants that the town may be received. All of that has to be calculated on this recap sheet. The end result is the tax levy. So if you don't have local receipts, now at the end of calculating the recap sheet, that's how much you're raising the taxes. So 2.5 lets you raise them 2.5 automatically. So provided you have not reached your levy capacity yet. So if you've reached your levy capacity, then you have to go for a formal override. That's how that works. So there's this huge sheet. I mean, I won't bore you with it, but it's part of the process. Receipts are part of the process to be consistent with, keeping up with either the CPI index or, other towns, or you're looking at, geez, we only charge $50 and like Jack figured out our sheet and it's actually costing us money, so we're under the water, So once we start with that 3-year plan, now we will be more consistent and we won't have to go through the process that we went through tonight and realize, we haven't raised our fees in 16 years, because it's marginal, but it's also, it impacts it. So, and that's why it's good to go through this exercise. In DLS, they have you can call them anytime. They have, this is part of my finance handbook for the finance committee. And we get updates all the time. So it's, it's an exhausting process. It takes a long time to really completely understand the process.
Yeah, doesn't the assessors go through a lot of that process?
Yep.
I know I've talked with Gene in the past. I've had conversations with Kevin.
Yeah, your finance team.
There's a lot of going back and forth and making sure that everything is in order. And then you're sort of told where you can be.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. So the finance team is, the assessor's office, the collector treasurer's office, the town accountant's office, the town administrator. That's your finance team. And then they meet before you set any budget, and they know what the budget is, what needs to be raised and appropriated, what your receipts are, and that's what the offset is.
What I discovered in looking up information, similar to what I did once before, they have at DLS, they have every Wednesday from 10 a.m. to noon, Ask the Chief. So you can actually call in. It's a Zoom call. They kind of put you in queue with other people, right? And you're in turn, and your turn comes up, and then the gentleman will come on, and you have to introduce yourself and your position and town you're with, and kind of get into the discussion. So I thought it was pretty worked out perfect.
You don't realize those resources are out there until you have a conversation like this.
Yeah. That was pretty cool.
All right, so all good. So we can move on. All right, next item on the agenda.
Yeah,
I didn't know if you needed it.
I will after.
All right, so Board of Admin updates. Jack.
What's the first topic?
Eversource property on Providence Street update.
Yes, I'm still talking with Peter Bauer. I've asked him again what the status is for the refund check of the gentleman disposing mattress, and haven't heard back yet.
Is it Peter Bauer, Paul Bauer, or Peter Bauer?
Peter Bauer. Did I tell
Bauer
him
or
all again?
Bowman?
Bowman. The Eversource representative that I am in talks with.
Okay. Okay.
They did a great job too.
Yeah, it looks good down there.
Yeah.
In fact, I think you might have followed me down Providence Road one morning,
Oh, yeah?
and I was going down there to check it out. Looked just like your car, so you might have been behind me.
Was I up there?
No.
Recording.
Okay, flu clinics follow-up, please.
You want some down payment, please?
Ma'am?
All right, so for this year's senior center and Misco School, the numbers have improved again.
They're
So-
down everywhere.
Yeah, so the senior center this year had 14 vaccinations and Misco School event had 22 vaccinations.
I think people are vaccine fatigued.
Well, I had my stuff before I went to, on my Viking cruise, because I said, you know what, I don't want to get anything there, on the plane and all.
I don't blame you.
Yeah,
A topic that came up last year, and I kind of forgot about it for this coming year with the flu clinic, was the concept of the super shot.
Yeah.
And whether
The
or
high
not
dose.
we would want to introduce it. And I never actually followed through, and from your perspective is, because I had a couple of inquiries about it last time.
Right, and I thought we asked the question.
And Levante, she said she doesn't do the super flu because of the cost of it and the lack of participation of ordering those.
And I'm assuming there has to be kind of a minimum.
I would
Yeah,
assume.
it is. You know
Right.
what it is? You know what the high dose is? It's a dose and a half of the flu shot.
Of the regular, okay.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
And some seniors, that's all they want, and others, it doesn't matter.
Well, so in a way, it's a little bit of a maybe a misunderstanding or a misperception that this super shot is something that's maybe more than what.
It's the vaccine only 1.5 doses.
Okay.
Right, Joseph?
yep.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Okay.
Has this been a steady decline?
It's everywhere.
Okay.
I never, and-
Are the people vaccine,
fatigued.
or are they getting it other places?
Other places, because CVS has,
Yeah, I mean,
you can walk in COVID now too, because we're not getting the COVID vaccine, because now they're charging you for it, it's not free anymore, so a lot of people are going to CVS and they're getting the COVID and the flu.
Flew at the same time.
Right.
That's what we did
Yeah.
before we went on our.
Yeah.
I ended up going to CVS, my wife and I, only because we could go at like 6:30, 6:45 in the morning, and
Mhm.
we were done.
Yep.
No line, no waiting, and off to work you go.
During a conversation with the VNA, one of the community towns had zero participation,
Yeah,
had a clinic set up and nobody came,
no,
Oh, wow.
nobody registered.
Nobody.
yeah.
So
Well,
that
that
was
is-
bad.
No, that kind of hurts.
That's
But the
odd.
thing is, though, is that it doesn't necessarily mean, I think there's a little bit of fatigue, but I also believe that they're going to the CVS's and the Walgreens, you know, but
Right, that's why I was
still,
asking the question.
but we still, as a community, as a board, should offer the vaccine. You know, I know like Ann goes into the schools and our public health nurse goes into the schools, and it's important.
Should we be considering offering it sooner than the October timeframe?
No,
No?
No, that's-
no. Plus you have the homebound people too that, you know, that can't get to the CVS's and Walgreens or even to your local clinic that, you know, the public health nurse goes into their home. I mean, we have several of them, you know, when we go into the home. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get the vaccine. So it's important
Right,
for us
yeah.
to still participate in the vaccine program.
To that point, would it be advantageous to consider a location like Sunrise Apartments? They have a community building in the middle.
If you had enough of them sign up, yes. But historically,
They go to the senior center.
yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how mobile some of them were. I know, I do see a lot of them, you know, those residents driving in and out, but I know, Like we deliver meals
Yeah,
at Thanksgiving, the brothers deliver meals, and the people that we deliver to seem to be pretty much on their own, unfortunately, especially if at Thanksgiving. So I didn't know how mobile the residents of Sunrise are. And I'm thinking now that we do have the senior bus.
Yeah.
So the senior bus would go and pick them up and bring them to the senior center. I wasn't even thinking of.
But still to offer, so that they know, because there's some that just don't want to leave their homes, or that for either they physically can't, or, they're mentally, and we go into the house. I think it's important for us as board community to still have the vaccine program for our residents.
I wonder if that's a conversation to have with Amy. If she thought, because you don't want to say, all right, we'll go to Sunrise, and that just dilute the people that go to the senior center. So maybe someone like Amy could say, well, this is how many people that are Sunrise residents.
Incapable of going.
Well, or that we transport to the senior center to get the shot. We may already be covering those residents more than I think.
Yep.
Because again, until we're just having this conversation, I'm thinking of having their own means of transportation. We have the senior bus. So the senior bus would go there and help them get to wherever they need to go on a regular basis. So we may already be covering them, even though I'm thinking of that as another location. I guess we just double check and make sure we're covering those.
Yeah, I'll be speaking with Amy anyway within the next week or two. We're gonna go over the permit application.
That's all I have.
All right.
Now we get back.
Health agent updates, please.
So 43 Blackstone Street, Paris is busy with town meetings, so I don't have much of an update for the board right now. I do have questions for her regarding the condemnation process. I just want to be clear. I want her to be clear in her advisement to the board, because I would like to consult with her before taking any further action on it. I want to make sure that that's the road that we want for her. 69 Hartford Ave West. I met with the property owner and her son-in-law, and explained to them, there's concerns. Very nice people, very receptive. Explained to me their situation, going to work with them. I have a progress inspection scheduled with them for the next 2 weeks. I went down, took a look at what was down there, and it's not, I've seen worse. How about that? I've seen worse. There is not, it's a lot of just living life things that are there.
Okay.
I explained to them the concerns with the wetlands. So I have a action in place, and where, like I said, I'm going to meet with them in 2 weeks. It's very, very nice, very receptive to it, acknowledged, that these are things that they need to take care of. There's a little bit of illness in the household. So I'll be working with them on that, and I'll keep the board apprised of that. Oxbridge Road, Jack got the releases. We let Mr. Reardon know that we have the releases. We're waiting for the post-blast well test. We will give him the releases, and then we can compare the pre-blast and post-blast testing.
Excellent.
Do we get releases for all?
6 out of 7.
6 out of 7.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
That was a very important thing.
Out of curiosity, was there just no response from the 7th one?
No response from the mailing or emailing.
Okay.
No, we don't knock on the door.
I can knock on the door.
Okay.
That's not a problem. I can knock on the door.
Yeah, but no, that's great, because we really couldn't move forward without that. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, Sean wanted to make sure that, given it's private information, that,
Absolutely.
And
I
yeah,
totally
yeah.
agree.
good way to go.
So that I'll make plans to reach out to the last the last person. See how successful we are. And then just the, this is the last weekend for food trucks. It was a great season. I mean, absolute privilege to work with Vanderhoek Farm and the food vendors, Barbell 88, the Lions Club. It was a pleasure to work with all of them. There's a handful of events to the end of the year that we'll be working with. Barbell 88 is planning another event. Then we have the Christmas parade. There's the Halloween thing, trunk or treat this weekend. And I think that there was going to be a Christmas event in there somewhere.
Where is the trunk or treat?
At the Veterans Pack. But it was, I mean, it was really truly a thrill to work with all of them. A lot of work, you know, Fridays, you know, some Saturdays and Sundays. And, but it was nice to see that participation locally. So and I look forward to working with them again.
Good.
Cool.
That's all that's on there. Thank you.
Topics not anticipated within 48 hours?
Jack, you want to offer? Or do you want me to start it?
You started.
Landfill.
Yes.
We have updates.
Landfill updates, I emailed, we met with DEP last Thursday.
Yep.
Greg Roots, he walked the landfill with me and Tom, looking at all the monitoring wells and the property itself. There are questions, obviously, the Water Health knows. Greg Root, I think I forwarded you the email from Greg Root. We need to measure the depressions in the land. And I'm gonna get measurements and send it to Jim McQuaid.
Yeah, Jim is the gentleman that I dealt with. He's a section chief.
Yep.
And they're gonna decide if we need to fill out a permit, because there was a permit process with DEP to fill in the depressions.
Yeah, what Greg had indicated was that if the depressions were a certain depth, it would then require a DEP permit in order to resolve it. But, and he felt that one area that we had walked might have possibly met that. But didn't he kind of indicate in that email thread that maybe going through Jim, you may not actually need to do that?
Correct.
Right.
That's why he wants us to get us the measurements first.
Yeah. So we need to get, I mentioned a wheel walk. You able to grab one from like Highway or?
Highway has one, I used it for the mapping.
So part of it is they need to get measurements from the distance of these monitoring wells to private wells in the area. And they were using what, 750 feet as a reference?
750 feet.
Right, yeah, 750 as a reference distance.
So this is what I put together for the DEP. These are 750 foot radiuses around the monitoring wells on the landfill and what properties are involved within those sections. So each circle is the radius of 750 feet around the middle, which is the monitoring well. And the following page like explodes it, which one.
Okay, so this is one well,
Yeah,
and that's the 750-foot radius.
around it, correct.
So that's the property out front. Right, that's on Bellingham Street. Okay. Yeesh.
But a lot of the wells on there, because they're tied into town water, the wells that are on some of those properties, I believe it's Talbot Farm Drive, they're irrigation wells.
Okay.
Which Greg said we did not have to be concerned with.
Concerned with.
Yeah.
Talbot Farm is tied into Hopedale Water.
Right, I forgot about that. Look at all
Right,
the
yeah,
pools.
because of the landfill.
Oh, the other item that came up is, Greg wanted to see locks put on the caps for the, soil gas ones,
The water.
for the monitoring wells.
That
So
makes
they're-
sense.
They're not locked.
Is there a loop?
There is a loop on all but one,
All but one, which was broken.
and,
But when we were touring the wells, like the shafts of the well is sinking below ground, so the cap and the hold together.
and the reason for that is inside the pipe, there's a tube that they keep there. So when they're doing their testing, it's on like a string, they drop it down, they get their samples. So because the pipe, the outside pipe, what we believe is depressed into the ground, that mechanism that's in the pipe sits above the level of the pipe itself, so it pops up. So when you put the cap on, it doesn't go all the way down to meet the loop on the base of the pipe.
Okay, so the outside casing is sinking into the ground.
Right. But what Greg said was, he felt that the folks at Atlas could do this, is you can Dremel or
Dremel tool.
Dremel tool.
Yeah.
And shave off a portion of that PVC piece and then
Put the cap back
put the
on.
cap back on it so that it now goes below.
Okay, so we have an outside metal casing,
Yeah,
and inside the metal casing is PVC plastic pipe?
yeah,
Okay, and because of the change in the outside metal casing, the PVC is now taller than the metal, so the cap won't shut.
you got
Yeah.
your cap and then you got your outside pipe and that little thing is your PVC testing thing. It's sitting above the pipe now.
Does that PVC move at all?
Well,
We didn't
we didn't play with them and I don't know what actually holds them in the.
So that's
spot.
just like an inner liner.
Well, it's actually a testing mechanism. They actually drop it. It has a little piece of twine on it. And then when they're actually doing the testing, it actually drops down. And so it's
So the
being held up
PVC
by something.
The PVC moves.
The PVC is like it's like this long.
Yeah,
Cause actually I saw it when I went one day, was it last year on that rainy day? They were doing testing. They drop it down in and they bring up the samples in it. But for whatever reason, where it attaches to the inside, where it sits, that outside shaft is sunk into the ground so that this little PVC thing is no longer at the height of the outside pipe.
When they bring
actually
it up.
sticks up. So when you put the cap on, it's hitting that
yeah.
PVC thing and not making it down to be able to put a lock on it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
it's like a
Did they
little.
ever have locks on them, do we know?
Who?
Did they ever have locks on them?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I'm
I-
surprised.
I didn't know if they stopped locking them because they couldn't get the cap on all the way. And we just never,
Yeah, well, I know the time I was there testing, I never saw them taking off a lock on any of the caps at that time, but.
okay.
So plus, I did speak with Jennifer Snag from Atlas. She goes, they can do it at additional cost.
Mhm.
But she wants me to go out there and take pictures of what the caps look like now. So I guess we could go out there and take pictures of the wells.
Unfortunately,
We can go to
we don't have much of a choice.
Right.
And I don't know if that's something that we want to mess with
Oh, I don't think,
because it's their mechanism,
yeah,
Right,
I would,
yeah,
right? If it was just a PVC sleeve, I'd say no big deal. But if it's part of their testing mechanism,
yeah,
if something goes wrong, now we're replacing the mechanism.
Mhm.
and Greg felt that, Atlas should be the entity that should be involved in making that all kind of
Okay.
work.
We'll wait to hear back and
Yeah, we'll go out and take pictures.
get a price as to what we're into and,
And it's only on the well water ones, not the soil gas ones.
okay. And we'll, discuss it and obviously we have to move forward, but at least we'll know what we're getting into.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay,
That's all I have for landfill.
Yeah, that's all I,
now, measuring the depressions.
Mhm.
So do they want to know the diameter and the depth of the,
it
Yes.
seemed to be the depth of the high point where it depresses down toward the cap was their level of reference for whether or not an actual permit.
okay, how many are there that need to be measured?
Well, one definitely, that was
Uh,
on the right-hand side,
Three,
so
at
I would say
least,
three.
that I
Okay,
could think of,
But I would say the largest one was on the right-hand side. of the drawing.
it's on the right-hand side.
any idea what the diameter of them is?
You could,
Bigger than this.
30,
Bigger than that?
Yeah.
could be 30 feet.
Diameter?
Well, so it's not all,
It kind of goes like this throughout.
yeah, and if
So I'm
you,
thinking of just doing a length, width, and how deep it is.
Yeah, because the reason I'm asking is, I mean, you take an 8-foot 2x4
Yeah,
and lay it across,
yeah,
and then in the center, you drop a tape measure,
Mm-hmm.
because that 2x4 that you lay across the rim gives you your height. You get your depth by measuring down from that 2x4. So, an 8-foot 2x4 is easy to handle. 12-foot 2x4 is not terrible to handle, but a 30-foot 2x4 is impossible.
so the one area that I think we're both considering here, we'll think about on the right, it's kind of an interesting one because the map that we had, I think we'd all seen it at one point, it was the one Atlas did up?
yeah, it grew up, yes.
Which actually threw Greg off a bit because he commented that on Atlas's map, they had wells right in the middle of the landfill. And Greg was of the impression that was the case, so he already had a level of concern. And then when he realized that wasn't the case, he goes, oh God, because that's good, because you never want to put a well in the middle of the landfill. We
Right.
showed him where they were on the edge, but on the right, it's almost like if you're going up the driveway, it's almost like a strip, like an elongated strip as opposed to a round,
Okay.
huge area.
It's
So,
not a pothole, it's a.
right, so
Yeah.
and what his goal is there was, and it may not necessarily be to fill, but to slope. So that his concern is the water,
Right.
right? So to slope the water away and to kind of even that out as opposed to filling a complete round depression. On the other side, there was one of those.
Yes.
That was more roundish in nature,
Yeah,
almost like a little
The other
crater.
thing that could be done is you need 2 stakes. And you need a
Sure one?
Yeah,
Okay,
medium rare,
all right.
big potato,
All right,
Texas
sounds
toast, yeah. You need at least 2 stakes. You need some stretchy twine, mason's twine.
Yeah.
And you tie it from one stake to the other stake at ground level.
Okay,
Now you can go into the middle of the depression and measure down from the string. Because the string gives you your top rim. So it takes some time.
so I think that'd be the easiest thing to do, is
Depending-
2 stakes on the string.
I have
Instead of
string.
8x4 or
Yeah.
8x12.
Well, yeah, that's why I was trying to get a feel for how big an area, you're talking about.
The stake and the twine mechanism would be a better approach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have stakes in the twine.
And actually, if you wanted to make sure that well,
Yeah, everything.
Handy little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really would, I was gonna say, I could give you a line level, but it really doesn't need to be the
I
line
have
level.
line level too.
Yeah, oh, there you go. It really doesn't need to be level. It just needs to be at ground level on the rim
Mhm.
of the depression.
Yeah.
Because now if that line is taut, that's why you want some stretchy string,
Mhm.
because you want to tighten it as much as you can without breaking it.
Yeah,
And then, like I said, you go to what looks like the deepest
part of
area
the section, yeah.
and just measure down with a tape measure, and that'll give you your depth.
I think that'd be the best way to go.
All right, so we got to measure those.
Yep.
We're waiting to hear from Atlas as to how they'll adjust the caps.
I have to go out there and take pictures and send her the pictures.
So we can do both of those.
Oh, we can do that at the same time.
Right.
All right.
Right.
How are we doing with the catch basin? And did that come up at the inspection?
It's on the radar last,
It's on the radar. He said he's waiting for his machine to come back.
yeah.
Because he goes, it's on my radar. And Tom was like, well, how big is this radar?
How big is the
How big's your
radar?
radar? And he goes, depends on when my machine comes back.
Right.
Okay, well, the ground's not gonna freeze for a long time, so.
I know, next week, so they're gonna be.
We're good there.
Yeah. Next week too. 'Cause-
But I didn't know if that came up at the inspection.
The basin, yeah, well, when we walked it, it was, we pointed it out that that's gonna be,
That was kind of the next thing that we thought we were gonna get off the list.
Right.
I mean, they definitely see that we're making progress.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he knows, Jim
Yeah.
Clay knows what doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys should be like good friends
Experts,
by now.
yeah.
yeah, that's funny. I haven't talked to Jim. I've been actually talking to Greg more, because
Oh,
Greg
really?
actually works for Jim. So I think Jim has been delegating a lot more toward Greg in this area. So, which is fine. Greg's a
Both
nice
of the
guy.
guys, I know both of them.
Oh, yeah, Greg's very good. Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very, man, the knowledge he's got,
So right here is where the big depression is.
incredible.
Okay. What you might want to do, depending upon how big it is run the string across in a couple of different spots and then give him your average depth. Because it could, let's say it's 4 inches here and 6 inches here and 2 inches here. You take an average of the three, might be a more accurate because of the size of it.
Yeah.
You know, or you could map it out and show him, at this point it's 6, at this point it's 4, at this point it's 2.
That's the way I was gonna go.
You know?
The more
And-
detail, the better.
Yeah, and they can see that it's a larger depression,
Yeah.
but it varies in depth. I mean, probably, you know, air pockets or organic material that's broken down over the years and you get depressions. It, you know, it happens all the time. It's just, unfortunately, this is something that if it gathers water, we're gonna have issues. All right, anything else in topics not anticipated?
I was just wondering about 43 Blackstone. The 43 Blackstone Street?
That was the one that we're waiting on Karis.
Oh, is that what? we're
Yeah.
doing? Oh, okay.
That's the trailer
Yeah, yeah.
gentleman who we can't
Who's not-
seem to strike
I
up
know.
a conversation with yet.
Yeah, we're waiting on Karis.
Okay, just wondered.
All right? All good?
All good.
Good and welfare for the board? I think the only thing I heard in the news recently was they found some markers that may indicate some concussions that may
Yes.
have been missed.
Yeah.
So they're getting deeper into that to see if there's another layer of evaluating concussions.
Oh, no, good.
Yeah, it was on the news tonight.
Right, okay, yeah, they're looking at, I heard it within the last 3 or 4 days. Yeah, they're going through brain scans. And I think it was geared towards football players.
Yeah.
To see if something was missed.
Surprise, surprise.
So I think that's the only thing that I've seen. All right. Let's set the next meeting.
November 13th.
November 13.
Well, it's not a Friday.
6:30 again, work for everybody?
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome. All right, motion to adjourn,
I move we adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good night, all.
Thank you for all the